tribunal has been held at the request of 9 organisations. There'll be a list in the annex. The defendants were notified but failed to appeal or respond. First of all, we wish to pay tribute to the courage of the people of Rojava and to express our gratitude, particularly to those who have shared their experiences with us. We thank the team of prosecutors, witnesses, and participating organisations for the diligence and commitment with which they have assembled and presented an extraordinary wealth of evidence for this tribunal. The testimony we've heard paints a consistent, compelling picture of widespread, pervasive and systematic punishment of a people, their crimes being purged and creating a society built on principles of equality, justice and solidarity. The aim of the punishment is the eradication of the Kurdish identity, presence and culture. The people of Afrin were forced from their homes when the city was occupied by Turkey in 2018. The Kurdish population went from over 90% to 25% as their homes were seized and offered to Sunni Arabs and Turkmen, often themselves internally displaced after Syrian government offensives. Properties were systematically looted, storefronts and street signs replaced with Turkish names, the currency and postage became Turkish. Turkish replaced Kurdish as a language of instruction. Land and property were seized, factories dismantled, the olive industry confiscated, olives repackaged and sold as Turkish. We heard that many displaced from Afrin suffered multiple displacements through Al-Shabaab, overcrowded tented camps with no access to health care or basic necessities, and escalating violence, to Al-Tabqa, travelling through conflict zones after another wave of military operations. We heard that around 120,000 people were forced out, 40% children, another 40% women, many of the others elderly or vulnerable. The current total of displaced was put at 300,000. Some went to Tel Rifat, where in December 2019 they were subjected to shelling in a wholly civilian area where children were playing in an alley near a school. Of the 10 people killed by the 2 shells fired by Turkish artillery, 8 were children, as were 9 of those injured. We heard the testimony of a parent with a 5-year-old son who was killed and whose 7-year-old was wounded. This was one of many such indiscriminate attacks on civilians in the aftermath of the occupation of Afrin. In Afrin itself, we heard of many arrests, summary killings of political activists and emergency responders, disappearances. We heard how people could tell the time by the screams and cries of those tortured, which began at 9 in the morning and went on until 5 in the evening. A survivor said, "My memory of detention is pain that I shall feel for the rest of my life." We were told of abductions, sexual assaults, rapes of women and girls. The secret prisons converted from schools, agricultural buildings, train stations, and the inability of survivors to speak out for fear of detention and torture. the lack of effective remedies in the militia-controlled courts. We heard evidence of bombardments of other villages of north and east Syria in October 2019, leading to forced displacements of nearly 140,000 more people. We saw evidence, photographic, medical and laboratory analysis of the use of white phosphorus, whose use against civilians is prohibited. And the same pattern of occupation, violence, human rights abuses, land and property seizures, and resettlement by other groups to prevent the return of those forced out. Some areas have seen more than 27 attacks by the Kurdish army or its proxies. Not military areas, but farmers' fields and villages. The multiple displacements have scattered families, with some family members dead, some whose fate is unknown. We heard how vital civilian infrastructure has been destroyed to make life impossible. We saw photographic evidence of repeated bombings of gas and electricity plants and oil installations, meaning no fuel for warmth and cooking, but also no water, as the largest water plant couldn't operate, leaving 1 million people in villages, in refugee camps, in informal settlements, as well as hospitals, without clean running water, leading to, amongst other things, dysentery and cholera. The nature of the bombing made it clear that it was deliberate, not accidental. We heard about attacks on medical facilities, treating tens of thousands of patients in Kobani and Kandishra, which again, through their targeting and repetition, are clearly deliberate. About attacks on the environment through illegal logging of forest areas, sometimes for illegal settlements. The attacks on women, the political feminist side of women challenging patriarchy and working for gender equality, and the brutal rapes of Kurdish women by Turkish intelligence officers in the secret prisons, were shown to be a direct attack on the Rojava model, although this attack was strongly resisted by the Rojavan women. And finally, today, we heard evidence of acts of cultural and historical erasure, including the bombardment and desecration of Afrin's graveyards and archaeological and historical sites, a 3,000-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site now repurposed as a military training ground. We heard of the bombing of Shemoka, an experimental intercultural school for displaced children, causing the deaths of a number of students, and the bombing of Simav Printing House in Hamilton, in which 7 people were killed. Journalists recording Turkish attacks on civilian infrastructure were also killed. What does this pattern tell us? Turkey's attacks on Syrian territory without UN Security Council authorization amounts to an international crime of aggression. The pattern of attacks, bombings, shellings, drone attacks, atrocities against civilians, the forced displacement and demographic engineering through replacement of populations, the destruction of power and damage to water supplies, the environmental damage, the destruction of cultural heritage and educational institutions, the use of rape, torture, secret detention, are all contrary to international law. All constitute crimes against humanity and war crimes, and they are indicative of genocide. It's not for us, as a People's Tribunal, certainly not at this stage, to adjudicate on the legal nuances We can, however, express our horror and outrage at what we've heard. And we can add that the pattern tends to confirm witnesses' testimony that the aim is to drive out the Kurdish people and culture. The evidence drives us to the conclusion that all the defendants are criminally responsible. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Hulusi Akar, Minister of Defence between 2018 and 2023, Hakan Fidan, Head of Turkish Intelligence in the period and now Foreign Minister, Yasha Yura, Chief of the General Staff during the period and now Minister of Defence, Ümit Dündar, General. So what is Turkey's justification and what does Rojava represent? Turkey claims that its operations are self-defense against terrorists and their supporters in Rojava. The claim is patently unfounded. The Democratic Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, DANS, formed in 2014 out of the chaos of the Syrian civil war, is a model of direct democracy, justice, ethnic coexistence, gender equality, and peace, founded on principles of pluralism and inclusivity. And it's a model of autonomous self-government, a model the Turkish government is set on destroying. Women working for peace are, according to this narrative, terrorists deserving summary execution. While Turkish armed forces carry out many military operations in Syria, the Turkish government also uses proxies, militias that it has funded and provisioned with weapons. And the evidence indicates that these militias are ISIS-aligned groups. Thus, the evidence points not to the Kurds of Rojava as the terrorists whose fighters fought ISIS or Daesh, but to the Turkish state and its senior ministers as those directing terror against civilian populations. So, what is the current situation in Syria? The focus of the evidence has mainly been on the period 2018 when Afrin was occupied to late 2024. But recent events have meant the focus has shifted to the present and the future, despite Turkey's continuing aggression against Rojava. It is of vital importance to the future of the Kurds that the new Syrian administration engages positively with Daesh, acknowledging it as an autonomous, self-governing part of the territory of Syria, which does not threaten Syria's territorial integrity. And it's of equal importance that this new administration protects and respects Kurdish life, culture, and autonomy. What are the obligations of the international community? The international community is aware of the continuing suffering of the Kurdish people and the crimes of the defendants, but has taken no meaningful action. There is no state recognition of Daesh. There is no possibility of domestic or international redress for the violations. It is vital that the experience of the Kurds of northeast Syria and the crimes against them are properly acknowledged, that Daesh is internationally recognized as an authentic, representative and democratic self-governing administration, and that the international community immediately ensures the cessation of the attacks by Turkey, direct and indirect, on the Kurdish people of Rojava in order to avert